So to get you guys ready for your practice for today's assignment, we're going to talk about how to solve these radical equations, real world, cube roots, and square roots. So we're going to go through those steps. Basically the same process that we did last time. Those 4 steps of isolating your radical on one side, squaring it or cubing it on both sides, and then you go ahead and solve the equation from there. So we're going to take a look at that first one, second one, third one. So make sure you guys are pausing so that way you guys have a chance to work them out, because that's how you're going to learn. Basically, you practicing through them and just trying to figure out the thought process from there. Okay, so let's go ahead and start with number 1. So number 1, I have the square root of negative 3x plus 7 minus the square root of 8x minus 4. So for this one's a different kind of case where basically I have 2 radicals all on the same side. So the one thing I definitely want to do is just isolate or move one to the opposite side, but I want to keep them positive. So in other words, I have to take a look at which one would make more sense to move. I'm going to take a look at this. So I'm going to add this whole radical to the other side. So all this is going to cancel out, so leaving me with this one here, negative 3x plus 7. And this one here of 8x minus 4. So now I have radicals on both sides. So if I want to get rid of the radicals, so remember, in order to cancel those out, I have to do the inverse. I want to square it. What that essentially does is basically when I square both sides with a radical, it's just going to cancel out this square root here. So I have a negative 3x plus 7. That comes out here. And then I have my 8x or 8x minus 4 here. So now we have a simple equation, variables on both sides. Now we go ahead and solve. I like to put my x's on the left, so I kind of stick with that notion of just moving those over here first. Negative 3x, negative 8x, and I have negative 11x. Bring down my 7, bring down my negative 4. So now I want to move that constant away from this x so I can get this by itself. So minus 7, cancels, negative 11x, negative 11, and then get rid of this negative 11 by dividing. Cancel, so therefore x equals 1. Okay, so that's how you solve when you have radicals on both sides. Okay, pause the video. We'll take a look at number 2 in a second. Alright, cube roots. So cube roots are different because square roots, basically you're trying to find the number that multiplies to itself twice, cube roots 3 times. So what we're going to do for this one is if I want to cancel out this, I have to do what same process like we did with number 1, is I got to figure out how can I cancel out this radical. So in other words, since it's to the cube root, well, I'm going to raise it 3 times just so that way it cancels it out. Square root 2 can raise it to the second power, just like what we did before. But what I do to one side, I got to do to the other. So now what's going to happen is this cube root and this cube part here, this cube power, basically is going to cancel out. And I'm going to get that 2x minus 2 outside of it. And now I'm going to repeat this. So remember, this means negative 2 times negative 2 times negative 2. So if I go ahead and do it just by hand, I have 4 times negative 2, negative 8. So now this turns to a negative 8. Okay? And now I have just a simple equation where I can solve. Get x by itself, so I gotta move this over to the opposite side. Those 2 cancel, 2x. So they're opposite signs, so I'm going to subtract. So I have a negative 6 times. Divide 2, divide 2. So therefore x would equal negative. And that's basically all you have to do for these cube root functions and solving. So isolating the radical, it was already isolated. Cubing it or squaring it, depending on what type of radical you get, and then solving it algebraically from there. Okay, pause the video while I get started with number 3. So this is more of a word problem. So what we're talking about, the scenario based off your worksheet or your Google sheet there says that a rhino can be modeled by this particular formula to figure out its height and its age, where H represents the height in terms of centimeters, and T, of course, represents its age in terms of years. So what we're going to take a look at is applying a real-world situation with some knowns that they're going to give us. So what we're going to do is set it up first is saying that H, if we already know their height, I'm just going to substitute it in here. 150 4 cube root of x plus 36. Okay, so I have this up front. That means that these two are going to multiply here, so I got to leave that part last, but I have to move this 36 over. So I'm going to subtract 36 to both sides. So those are going to cancel out. 150 minus 36. That would be 114. 23.4 cube root of x. Okay, now we're going to definitely need a calculator for this one because it's going to give us a decimal number. So if I take a look real quick, I want to get rid of this part. So 23.4 by dividing. What I do to one side, I do to the other. Now I have 114, right? Yep, divided by 23.4. So I'm going to get about 4.8717948. So very ugly decimal number. So what's going to happen is now these two cancel. This is what this simplifies to, equals my cube root. Well, remember what we did in the last one. If I want to cancel this out, I have to raise it to the third power. Well, now this, I also have to raise it to the third power. So what I do to one side, I have to do to the other. So turn my calculator sideways, take that same number and cube it. So what that tells us is RT, or basically what this part represents. That should have been T. So that means their age, their T part, is going to represent 115.62905, and of course my decimal keeps on going. So they're roughly around 115 years old, maybe 116 if we round it up. Okay, so putting 115 or 116 if we round will basically be your answer for their age for this particular rhino here. Okay, so pause the video. What you guys have next are 12 practice problems for you guys to work out. Just practicing this whole concept and the skill for your test.